All right, let's talk about money. We're all taught to think about it in terms of spreadsheets and hard numbers and cold, rational logic. But what if I told you that the most important financial decisions you'll ever make have almost nothing to do with math? Today, we're going to look at the very personal and honestly kind of counterintuitive financial philosophy from an expert who says our feelings about money, they're not just valid, they're everything.
It all starts with this question. It seems so simple, right? What do you own and why? It's a question a billionaire investor named Sandy Gottsman used to ask people in job interviews. And he wasn't looking for a hot stock tip. He was looking for the gap. You know, that little space between what makes perfect sense on paper and what a person actually does with their own money. And that gap? Well, that's where all of us live.
And this just sums up the whole conflict perfectly. Your spreadsheet is always asking, what's the mathematically optimal move? But let's be real. We don't make our biggest life decisions inside a spreadsheet. We make them at the dinner table, thinking about our family, our fears, our dreams. The real question, the one that actually matters, is way simpler. What helps you sleep at night?
And what's wild is that this gap is everywhere you look. Just think about this. Studies have shown that about half of all mutual fund managers in the US don't put a single dollar of their own money into the funds they manage. And get this, many doctors choose way less aggressive end-of-life treatments for themselves than they might recommend to their patients. Now, this isn't about them being hypocrites. It's a huge reminder that when the stakes become personal, the so-called right answer can completely change.
So, if the whole point isn't just to squeeze every last penny out of our investments, then what are we even doing? Well, let's dive into what author Morgan Housel calls the grandmother of all financial goals. And I promise you, it's probably not what you think.
Independence. Simple as that. But this isn't just about retiring and not working anymore. No, it's about control. It's the freedom to wake up in the morning and say, I can do whatever I want today. It means you only do the work you truly love, with people you actually admire, and you do it on your own schedule. That right there, that's the real prize.
And for Housel, this idea really hit home because of his dad. His father was an ER doctor. I mean, you can't imagine a more high-stress job. But he lived really frugally. And why? So he could build up this cushion, this financial fortress that gave him the power to one day just walk away. On his own terms. He wasn't saving for a fancy car. He was buying his own freedom.
So how did Housel and his wife actually do this? Well, the strategy was surprisingly simple, but so powerful. As their paychecks got bigger over the years, they made a very deliberate choice not to let their lifestyle get bigger at the same speed. You know, they stopped the goalposts of what they wanted from moving further and further away. And that created a gap between what they earned and what they spent. And that gap became their independence fund.
Okay, now this is where things get really interesting. To protect that hard-won independence, Housel makes two huge financial moves that he freely admits are, on paper, completely indefensible. I mean, these are the kinds of things that would give a traditional financial advisor a heart attack.
So confession number one is a big one. He owns his home. Outright. No mortgage payment every month. Now, in a world with super low interest rates, that just sounds like financial madness, right?
Let's just break this down. The spreadsheet logic is crystal clear. You could probably get a way higher return investing that money in the stock market than the, say, 3 or 4% interest you're paying on your mortgage. But then there's the psychological reality. For Housel, paying off that mortgage was the single best financial decision he's ever made. Why? Because the peace of mind, the absolute certainty that his family's home is theirs, no matter what, well, that's a return you just can't measure on a spreadsheet.
All right, you ready for confession number 2? It's just as wild. On top of owning his home, he keeps a huge chunk of his wealth in, well, plain old cash.
And listen, we're not talking about a small rainy day fund here. We're talking about 20% of his entire net worth, just sitting there, not invested, technically losing a little bit of value to inflation every single day. But the why is what matters. Yeah, an advisor would look at that and see a total waste, a drag on his returns. But in Housel's mind, that cash is the oxygen of independence. See, it's not there to buy stuff. It's a strategic weapon. It guarantees that if the market crashes, he will never be a forced seller. He'll never have to sell his stocks at the worst possible time just to pay the bills. That cash is a shield that protects his real long-term investments.
So with these crazy, indefensible moves, you're probably thinking his investment portfolio must be some kind of ridiculously complex machine, right? Well, the truth is actually the exact opposite. Let's take a look at his beautifully simple strategy.
His entire stock portfolio is just in low-cost index funds. That's it. Seriously. No trying to pick the next hot stock, no fancy strategies to try and beat the market. Just simple, broad, boring index funds.
Because he figured out that financial success isn't about being a genius investor. It's mostly about just not messing things up. And his whole strategy rests on these 3 simple pillars. A really high savings rate to build that independence fund. Patience, just having the patience to let your money do its thing for years and decades. And finally, a deep, long-term optimism that over time, the world will keep getting better. It's all about your behavior, not your brilliance.
And that, right there, brings us to maybe the most validating and powerful message in all of this. No one is crazy. That neighbor who buys lottery tickets, your uncle who only trusts real estate, your friend who's absolutely terrified of the stock market, they're not irrational. They're just living out their own unique experiences with money and trying to find a way to check the boxes that help them feel safe and comfortable.
When you boil it all down, this is what we're left with. The absolute best thing your savings and investments can give you isn't another zero in your bank account or a fancier car. The highest dividend money will ever pay is the ability to control your own time, to live your life on your own terms.
So I'll leave you with this. The final question isn't what the spreadsheet tells you to do, it's about you. Forget for a second what you think you're supposed to do, and just ask yourself, what's the financial strategy that truly, honestly lets you sleep soundly at night? Because finding the answer to that, that's the real secret to being wealthy.